Welcome back to another episode of Growing Green Thumbs with Portland Nursery, where novice and experienced gardeners come together to talk about all things plants. This week, we have our first ever call-in guest on the show. Her name is Leah McDaniel from Black Sheep Gardens, all the way from the East Coast in upstate New York. Award-winning Black Sheep Gardens has installed over 200 weddings thus far and has been featured on the cover of Florist Review back in 2019. It's a spectacular cover, and I highly recommend checking it out. But before we start picking Leah's brain today about her passion for floral design and installation pieces, Katie has her weekly reminder about what zone we're broadcasting from and why that's an important thing to consider.
Right. So once again, Zone 8B, carve it into your brains.
It's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
So I'm going to double check this with Leah in just a second. But I think she's calling from Zone 5A. So that's a fairly different playing field over there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's just like that episode we talked about recently with the winter interest, a lot of different things going on there.
Yeah, there's not much going on up there.
This time of year, no.
Brutal. So last season, Katie, you and I were kind of feeling things out and doing a lot of learning along the way. Neither of us had ever really podcasted before, and we were really focusing in on the technical aspects of gardening for beginners. And while we'll continue to keep that going throughout season 2, we also want to open things up a bit when we're lucky enough to have a guest on the show like we are today. When we open every episode, I always mention that we're getting together to talk about all things plants. So this season, we're going to really be exploring the passion for plants that our guests all possess, in addition to the more kind of instructional or technical aspects that they'll be bringing to the table as well. Because it's all just kind of inspiring and awesome to hear. So with all that being said, let's get Leah on the line and we'll get the show on the road.
That sounds awesome.
Leah, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi. Hi, John and Katie.
Hi.
How's it going over there?
It's cold, but we're good.
Right on. So thank you for coming on the show. Katie, I've known Leah for a long time, and this is the only way I could get her to take a phone call from me.
Ooh.
So
well, that's not
thanks,
a bad
Leah.
way to do it.
So Leah, I had mentioned this a second ago. I don't know if you were listening in. Do you know exactly what USDA zone you're in up there?
Yeah, so I would say the city of Plattsburgh is a 5A, but where I am, I'm out on the lake. And where my parents are, they're in West Shazy, and they're more of a 4A, like Lake Placid.
Ooh.
Yeah, I remember going out to your family's farm years ago, and like that one stretch of road, I swear was like a completely different climate than any other place in the surrounding area. It's just like 10 degrees colder all the time.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I lived there my entire life, and it was always about 10 degrees colder than all my friends' houses. So you are right on that.
Gosh.
I remember. So, Leah, I've known you for almost over 20 years now. And
you're aging me.
I know. Me too. Well, me too. So Leah's family's farm in upstate New York in West Shazy was probably the first farm that I can ever remember stepping foot on. And Leah, I think when we were kind of prepping for the show, you had noted that at the time, way back then, it was primarily an organic veggie and flower farm, right?
Yeah, my parents were actually one of the very first organic farms in upstate New York, so that's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
And then, it was a bit of a culture shock to me the first time I got out there on the farm with you and your family, like having largely been raised in the burbs. But your entire family was incredibly gracious and kind and always welcoming, but they would also like put you to work when you were out there. That was just like part of the agreement, And I remember this one time, and I've mentioned this to you before, but I remember the first time somebody on the farm put like a hay hook in my hand, and we were supposed to start tossing some bales of hay up in the barn, and your mother, Pam, took one look at this like gleam that I had in my eye, and she just kind of nicely walked over and was like, I don't think that you're ready for this quite yet, John. It like just kind of plucked it out of my hands, and she probably saved me from a few puncture wounds that day.
Yeah,
That's
I think
hilarious.
anyone who knows you knows that gleam, so she was right to do that.
It's I've since used one, but I don't get that like excitement in me when I'm holding on to it. So
Saved
Leah,
humanity there.
yeah, or me, just me. So Leah, I'm going to start off with this first question here. Katie and I have some questions for you along the way. So you're an amazing artist and designer, but you've obviously kind of honed your skills and craft along the way. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and training and what kind of ultimately inspired you to take this life path and make it a career?
Yeah, so I guess turning this into my life path wasn't ever the plan. I went to school actually with UJR for biology. I took some art classes here and there. I thought I would end up someplace warm, working with animals in some capacity.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that you have like an intense love of animals.
Yeah, that's still there.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess it was serendipity, luck, fate, whatever you want to call it. But I'm super grateful that I found it. I was working at a small law firm in Plattsburgh, and I became pregnant with my first son. Okay. So I knew I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom with him, but I still needed some source of income. So that's kind of how the first part of the business began. And like you had said, my parents had already had their organic flower and farm business that I grew up with.
I remember.
So, yeah. So this part of the business was just with my mom. I started it as a partnership. And we decided to focus, really on weddings. And we had lots of positive reactions, and we booked weddings like super fast. So, I realized I love being at weddings. There's so much joy and excitement. It's just really fun. And I also love go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Leah. I was going to ask, does Pam still work with you or no?
She works with me. Yeah, she does work with me. I bought the business from her. She's semi-retired, but she definitely helps on some of the weddings for sure.
And if I remember correctly, the name Black Sheep Garden, was that the name of the business originally when your mother was running it, or something similar?
So my parents' business was Black Sheep Barn and Garden.
Okay.
And then when we started this business, I thought at the time, before I knew what direction I was headed in, that would be a good idea to keep a similar name. But it has been confused quite a few times with their business, so that's been a little challenging. But yeah, I mean, I love the challenge, and I just crave getting better and learning more. So in terms of, the training, I just really sought out online classes, in-person workshops. I studied and read about, different philosophies of different floral designers. It was just like this whole world of art I never knew about, and it definitely sucked me in.
What do you just do weddings, or do you do other types of like floral arrangements and stuff like that?
Now it's really kind of evolved into weddings and events. We'll do corporate dinners and things like that. But it's a design studio. I don't offer public hours where people can just buy small arrangements or bouquets here and there. So
you're not doing farmers markets anymore, right?
Not anymore. No, we started that way, and then we headed in this direction, and I'm really happy we did.
Can you tell us a little bit about the type of work that like Black Sheep Gardens does and the types of services that you offer, like some of the pieces that you tend to make? I know you work with like arbors and mantle pieces. Can you kind of go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, and they're full-scale, wedding designs, so they typically have some sort of ceremony installation, whether, like you said, whether it's an arbor, whether it's like a half moon on the ground of flowers, or aisle decor, large arrangements at the beginning of the aisle. We'll do the whole ceremony setup, and then we'll do the reception, of course, which, like you said, it could have mantle pieces, it could have centerpieces. We could do floral chandeliers, we could do flower ceilings.
Wow, that's
awesome.
It's
just like, it's endless. It's pretty fun.
One of the things I should want to pause to mention here real quick. So if listeners want to take a moment and hop over to like Instagram, and if you look up Black Sheep Gardens Floral on Instagram, you can take a look at some of the work that Leah's going to be talking about today and maybe get a sense of her style while listening to this show. And also kind of speaking of style, if you were forced to kind of describe it, Leah, and I guess we're forcing you to describe it right here, how would you describe it?
Well, yeah, I try not to define myself by only one style. I know my work has a certain look, so I try to make it textural and artful as much as the client will allow. Mm-hmm. Living in the Adirondacks, there's often that wildflower element incorporated in as well. Mm-hmm. If I was forced to, you're forcing me.
Kindly.
Maybe modern Renaissance, maybe.
Okay, I could see that looking at your stuff. My notes say that you've done over 200 weddings. So what kind of unique challenges has that brought to you? Like doing like that many? I'm sure there's just like a lot that's happened throughout all that.
Yeah, I mean, with every single wedding, there's new challenges, and a lot of that is the venue itself, what they allow, where we need to do, where the pieces need to be, what their time frame is. So we could have anywhere from 3 days to 2 hours to set up. So that's a challenge.
Wow.
Weather is a huge, that's a huge challenge, whether it's raining or it's 20 below and everything has to be wrapped in plastic, or it's 100 degrees and I have to choose the right flowers that won't die within 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's quite the temperature and weather swing.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but it's fun to figure out. You just have the right team and you just have to take things in stride and do the best you can.
So at the beginning of the show, we were kind of mentioning the differences a little bit in the zone where you are and the zone where we're at. So we actually just did an episode recently on winter interest, and winter blooms were a part of that. But you're not necessarily getting those types of flowers growing naturally up in your area. So I would imagine also that it can be a challenge to kind of get your hands on certain things throughout the year. So I was kind of wondering, how you source material, if you're still growing your own flowers, and how you kind of go about keeping everything kind of fresh and exciting.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. So my mom still has a small garden, so I can get things here and there from her. I love growing perennials, so I have a couple stems and blooms that I can use here and there as well. We have a great farmer that we use out of Vermont during the warmer seasons. Shout out to Understory Farm. They're incredible. So we use them as much as we can, and then anything that we can't get seasonally from them or ourselves, we get from our wholesaler, and they're out of Burlington, Vermont, and they order from all over the world.
Oh, okay. So you might actually get your hands on some of the same sort of stuff that we're getting here from the wholesale.
Maybe. I mean, I do feel a little boxed in, and honestly, I haven't visited enough places to know what's out there entirely. Mm-hmm. You're basically a tropical zone compared to what we are.
Oh yeah, I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt.
I didn't even wear a coat to come, to the studio today.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I really love taking workshops with all these different designers, because they offer all these different plants that I may not see where I am. So, that's something that I'm always looking for, different things that I've never seen or used before.
Are there any materials or plants that you like working with more than others?
Yeah, I love textural, lots of things with movement. So blossoming branches are one of my absolute favorites. I would use them all the time if they were always around. Fritillaria, narcissus, poppies, basically spring flowers are my favorite. I like to use house plants, fancy tulips, and anything that might be a little unexpected that, people are like, oh, what's that? I've never seen that before in an arrangement. That's fun for me.
Like the anthuriums and monstera leaves and stuff like that?
Exactly. Cool. Yeah.
Leah, do you feel like you're kind of love for specific plants is often mirrored by your clients, or do they tend to seek out kind of plants that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily gravitate towards?
My clients, I think now they come to me for my expertise. Most of them know
what your aesthetic is.
Yeah, exactly. So they might have like a Pinterest page that they invite me to, and they say, I really like the look of this. I don't necessarily need the actual flowers in it. I just kind of want to make that aesthetic. So in terms of clients asking for specific flowers, that doesn't usually happen unless it's, poppies or something that is pretty popular in the wedding world.
Okay. So if you meet one of these clients and, it's a good fit and their aesthetic meets with your aesthetic and you get the job of the wedding or whatever, how do you start planning it all out? You obviously, I'm sure, like, are sitting down with them and like figuring out what they want, but like what's kind of like the nitty-gritty of all that?
Yeah, so a lot of it is based on what the client is looking for. So we'll have a consultation on the phone, and like I was just mentioning, most cases people who hire me have seen a bit of my portfolio, so they're comfortable with my style. We collaborate and put together a mood board based on what they want, what I suggest, what's in season, what will work for that venue, that sort of thing.
I could probably use a mood board.
It would just be cheese. It would only be cheese.
I'm in the mood for cheese today. I'm just going to have one column that says cheese, maybe a second one that says pizza. And the other one would be grumpy.
Well, a lot of people need that visual element. For me, it's easy to see in my head, but I can't expect that, for everybody. So I try to find pictures that are closest to what I have in my head, or I'll say it's going to be a combination of these three pictures. But most people, trust me. And so from there, I'll make a flower recipe for every individual item on their proposal, and then I'll see if I can get those flowers.
Are you doing everything from like these, like, I think the floral chandeliers you do are like amazing, but are you doing everything usually from like a floral chandelier down to a boutonniere, or is it kind of like parceled out to, do you work with other designers ever?
It's mostly me. I have a problem with wanting to do everything myself.
Okay.
That's all good.
I definitely have a great team. I don't want to say I don't have a great team, but I make sure I'm involved in every element, whether it's just a part of it and they finish it, or or I'm with it through the entire installation, and I have 3 people helping me, or whatever it is. But yeah, I'm usually up until 11, 12, 1 doing the boutonnieres and corsages.
Oh gosh.
I just like to do everything myself.
That must make like the fall wedding season just like a sprint to the finish.
Yeah, well, honestly, now in the Adirondacks, winter weddings are so popular.
Oh.
Lake Placid is really magical in the winter, and it's really popular with skiing, Whiteface Mountain. So my only months off that slow down are probably March and April at this point.
Wow.
So one of the things I was interested in seeing when you were kind of talking about, we were going through the questionnaire that you gave to us prior to the show, I thought it was interesting that you said, like, when you're doing one of these events, like plan A is usually out the window almost immediately. And then you're on to plan like B, C, D, E, and F by the time the thing is over. Is that like is that like the case? And how do you, I mean, I would imagine that there's times when you're losing product, or things are breaking, or things just aren't working out the way that they should have. Do you always have a series of backup plans?
Yeah, that is unfortunate. That there is a percentage of waste that happens with flowers and weddings. I'd say maybe half my van is usually packed with Plan B, C's, D's, and E's, whether it's other plants or other mechanics, or just backups for what could happen, whether it's mostly it's weather related. That's usually what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
Or on transport, things can fall and things can break. So yeah, you just really have to stay calm and rely on good mechanics. That's a big part of it.
Or if somebody from the wedding just doesn't show up. You're like,
Well,
hey,
hopefully
it looks
that won't
nice.
happen.
It looks beautiful. You can't deny that.
So far, a big knock on wood, I have not missed a date for a wedding. So that's a nightmare that I often have around wedding season. So
I had a question. So if you could list like or if you do have a list of a few design principles or techniques or elements that are kind of always at the heart of what you're creating, what would they be?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think we maybe mentioned some of this before too.
Yeah, I found with myself, I definitely work off instincts, but after studying under a few floral designers, one specifically named Passion Flower Sue, she teaches her students to use the 3-5-8 rule, which means there are 3 main focal points in a piece. So the 8 would be the dominant placement.
Mm-hmm.
So this gives the eye different areas to focus on, so it's not overwhelming or spotty to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So even if I don't follow this exactly, I make sure there are some dominant areas in a piece to draw the eye, and it gives it a more natural shape, and it's more interesting. Doesn't look too contrived. It really helps kind of calm down the piece a little bit.
So it's like the anchor of the piece, or no?
I don't know if you'd call it the anchor, because there's different areas that drives your eye.
Okay.
There's different points that your eye's going to look at, but it's not like overwhelming. Sometimes I'll put a piece together and I'm like, oh, it's yelling at me. I need to calm this down, and I'll move some flowers around so there's different areas to look at.
One of the things you had mentioned too is that you don't usually want your designs to kind of be predictable either, right? Like you don't want to like look at that and say like, oh, of course that's where that should be.
Yeah, and I definitely, I'm working on that with myself. I'm a perfectionist, so that gets in the way sometimes, and that's why I'm learning as much as I can from other designers always and forever.
Yeah. So when you're doing these like large floral chandeliers, like how long does it take? I know you said like sometimes you have like, 3 days or 3 hours, but like in like a normal span of time, like how long does it take you from like conception to creation, like hours wise, to like pull one of those off?
In terms of the floral chandelier, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Of course, it depends on the size, but maybe on average, I'd say 2 hours to put the design together, kind of on paper with a recipe and how it's going to look. 2 to 4 hours with mechanics. That's really important. You don't want to cheap out on the mechanics, that's for sure. And then 2 to 6 hours, depending on how in depth it is for installing at the venue.
Gotcha. And then like 3 hours after the wedding, they like hang out with the wedding party and score some cake.
Oh yeah, do you get to have any of the food?
No, I'm not one of the vendors that stays on site usually.
Okay.
And usually we set up and we leave, and then we'll come back the next day. And if it's a tent, then the tent company will pull down the chandelier. We've never done a chandelier inside a venue. So. Do
you compost, or what do you do with the pieces afterwards?
Yeah, that's the great thing about depending on what mechanics you use. Chicken wire is often used, and we use a ton of chicken wire where you just poke in the stems of the flowers. So afterwards, you can pull out the flowers, compost them, and then save the chicken wire for your next piece.
Oh, neat. That's great.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, you don't get any of the food from the weddings?
I don't know.
Well, John's never going to become a floral designer.
I was going to offer to like help out on one of these things, but now I'm not going to.
He was picturing it like Wedding Crashers.
Yeah, I'm going to put that in my mood board. I'm in the mood for cheese, but I can't get any now.
Well, I usually feed my help, if that helps, John.
So, Leah, you do this professionally. I was wondering, though, if you could offer up any advice for our listeners who may want to design some like of their own bouquets or centerpieces or mantelpieces for the holidays or like any other get-togethers, pretty much anything. Is there any like advice you could kind of offer up to them?
Well, I guess I would harp back on the whole mechanics thing. Chicken wire is your friend, so I would use that. That helps keep everything, it holds it all in place. I would suggest using seasonal flowers that you don't need to put in a cooler because most people don't have coolers at their own house. Mm-hmm. So anything that's used to that kind of season should hold up for you. Using reliables, roses, lilies, things like that. Do it yourself is harder than people think, but I think using those elements are a great start. But also, I always tell people that if you are doing it yourself, please read if any of the flowers are poisonous to your animals, such as lilies. That's really important.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, we at the nursery, we always, we get a lot of questions like that. And we always say, like, the best thing you could do is go check out the ASPCA site for information like that.
Everything up, yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
So, for anyone who is, like, thinking about starting this type of career, do you have any advice for them from all your years of experience?
Expect a challenge.
Don't come at me. It's my
practice on the West Coast.
Yeah. I've got this area cornered. It's cool, though.
No, I would say expect a challenge. The business end is just as important as the design end. Mm-hmm. Definitely go to as many workshops as you can, study as much as you can, and just practice on your own, aside from weddings or aside from what you're getting paid to do, find out what your style is and see what you love, and then find your boundaries, because that's a big one. People can walk all over you, and if you don't have boundaries, then you'll get burned out really fast.
I like just kind of creating some space between you and the life.
Right.
Stressed out wedding planners.
Yeah, I can imagine that actually, so in addition to like the stress you must be feeling, like it's also stressful for all the other people involved in the ceremony oftentimes. So like it's kind of like it's kind of coming at you from all directions, I would think.
Yeah, it is a high stress job. I would definitely say it's a high stress job, but every single other vendor I work with loves it just as much as I do. So we all work really well together, and that's really important. Everyone works, again, if there's a problem, everyone knows, just take your time, figure it out. It's going to be okay. We're all here. We're all professionals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's a whole world I never knew about until I got into it. It's a huge industry. It's really fun.
All right, Leah. It's been really exciting to talk to you today. It's been a while since we've actually chatted on the phone, so this has been exciting to kind of meet on a professional level, but also get to spend some time with a friend today. I did want to ask you real quick if you could go through your website, Addie, and your social media handles for everybody.
Yeah, sure. So earlier we talked about Instagram, so you can find me at Black Sheep Gardens Floral. My website is blacksheepgardens.com, and we are on Facebook at Black Sheep Gardens Floral Design.
Sweet.
Got it. All right, Leah, one more time, thanks again for coming on the show. Megan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely. Megan wanted me to say hello, too. That's my wife.
Oh, tell Megan I said hi. And Katie, it was really nice meeting you.
Yeah, same. Thanks for coming on with our very first phone interview.
Oh, yeah.
It was painless.
Yeah, you did an awesome job.
I hope so. I hope it comes out okay. You guys have a good night.
All right, Leah. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
So, one more time, thanks again, Leah, for being on the show. And many thanks as well to Talkcast PDX for producing Growing Green Thumbs with Portland Nursery. And thank you all for listening. Katie and I will be back next week, and she's going to have some seed-saving tips to share, right?
Oh, yeah. I got a bunch of them. Get ready.
Save some seeds. In the meantime, please remember that while Katie is here answering all of my plant questions, Portland Nursery is always available to answer all of your plant questions. Visit us today here in Portland, Oregon at 50th and Stark, 90th and Division, or check out portlandnursery.com, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, John.
See you, Katie.
Life is just one long